Eliza Armstrong slumped against the weather-beaten trunk of a cottonwood tree, her chest heaving as she fought to catch her breath. The distant thunder of hoofbeats still echoed in her ears, though she couldn't tell anymore if it was real or just the pounding of her own terrified heart. 6 days on the run, crossing the unforgiving plains of Nebraska territory with nothing but the clothes on her back, a canteen, and the small bundle of provisions she'd managed to grab before fleeing. The year was 1873, and Eliza Armstrong was a woman with a price on her head. She hadn't asked for any of this. 22 years of a quiet life in St. Louis, working as a seamstress in her father's shop, dreaming of something more but never daring to reach for it. Then came Thomas Blackwell, with his charming smile and promises of marriage. She'd been naive, foolish even, letting herself believe that a man like that, wealthy, connected, could truly love someone like her. The truth had revealed itself on that terrible night 6 months ago. The gambling debts, the desperate plan. The man who'd come to collect, ending up dead on the parlor floor. Thomas had fled, leaving her to face the accusations alone. A woman who killed a man even in self-defense stood little chance with the law. Especially when the dead man was the nephew of Judge Carlton West, one of the most powerful men in Missouri. The trial had been a farce, her sentence decided before she ever stepped foot in the courthouse. The night before she was to be hanged, her father had come to her cell. With the help of a sympathetic deputy, he'd given her a chance to run. "Head west," he'd whispered, pressing a small pouch of coins into her trembling hands. "Find a place to start again." Now, after weeks of hiding, stowing away on trains, and finally crossing the plains on foot, Eliza wondered if she'd ever find such a place. Judge West had sent men after her, professional hunters who tracked fugitives for the bounty. She'd spotted them 3 times since crossing into Nebraska territory, barely managing to evade them each time. Eliza forced herself to her feet. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the rolling landscape. In the distance, she could make out the faint outline of mountains. Nevada, perhaps? She'd lost track of the borders, moving only with the vague notion of heading west, always west. Her cracked lips stung as she took a small sip from her nearly empty canteen. One more day, perhaps 2, before she'd need to find water again. The thought filled her with dread. The last creek she'd found had been guarded by a rattlesnake, forcing her to move on without refilling her supply. As darkness fell, Eliza trudged forward, guided only by the stars overhead. The terrain had grown increasingly rugged, with rocky outcroppings providing both obstacles and potential shelter. When she spotted a small cave formed by fallen boulders, she made her way toward it, praying it wasn't already home to some wild creature. The cave was empty, shallow, but sufficient to shield her from the night wind. Eliza curled into a ball, using her threadbare shawl as a blanket. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of nooses and the thundering of hooves. Dawn broke with a crimson streak across the eastern sky. Eliza's body ached as she forced herself to move, every muscle protesting the continued abuse. Her stomach growled painfully. She'd finished the last of her food 2 days ago. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Eliza's vision blurred as she stumbled forward, no longer certain if she was heading in the right direction. When she crested a small hill and saw a glimmer of water in the distance, she nearly wept with relief. A river wide and flowing steadily through the barren landscape. She moved toward it with renewed purpose, oblivious to everything but the promise of water. That was her mistake. She never heard the riders until they were almost upon her. "There she is!" The shout cut through her haze of exhaustion like a knife. Eliza whirled around, terror surging through her veins as she spotted 3 men on horseback less than 100 yards away. Bounty hunters, the same ones who'd been tracking her since Missouri. Their leader, a hawk-faced man named Riggs, smiled coldly as he spurred his horse forward. She ran. Despite the futility, despite her weakened state, Eliza ran toward the river with every ounce of strength she had left. If she could just reach the water, perhaps cross to the other side. The sound of gunfire cracked through the air. A warning shot, kicking up dust near her feet. Eliza stumbled, falling hard onto the rocky ground. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to rise, forcing a cry from her parched throat. "End of the road, Miss Armstrong," Riggs called, his voice carrying on the wind as the riders approached. "Judge West is paying handsomely to see you hang properly." Eliza crawled forward, refusing to surrender even as despair threatened to overwhelm her. The river was so close, 30 yards, perhaps less. Behind her, she could hear the horses slowing to a walk, their riders confident in their capture. Then came a different sound, more hoofbeats, fast and hard, approaching from the west. A shout rang out, followed by the unmistakable report of a rifle. "What the hell?" Riggs's voice was sharp with surprise. Eliza turned to see a rider charging toward them, rifle raised for another shot. The bounty hunters scattered, reaching for their weapons as the newcomer bore down on them with reckless speed. In the confusion, Eliza found her feet again. Ignoring the stabbing pain in her ankle, she limped toward the river with renewed desperation. Behind her, gunfire erupted, an exchange of shots that seemed to last forever, but probably spanned only seconds. She reached the riverbank just as a horse thundered up beside her. Looking up, Eliza found herself staring into the face of a stranger, a man with sun-bronzed skin, eyes the color of a summer storm, and a determined set to his jaw. "Take my hand," he said, extending his arm toward her. "Now." Eliza hesitated only briefly before reaching up. The man's grip was strong as he pulled her onto the horse behind him, the animal dancing nervously beneath the additional weight. "Hold tight," he ordered, and Eliza wrapped her arms around his waist as the horse leapt forward, plunging into the river with a powerful surge. The water was cold, the current swift but not overwhelming. Eliza clung to her rescuer as the horse fought its way across, eventually finding footing on the opposite bank. Only then did she dare to look back. 2 of the bounty hunters remained on the other side, one clutching his arm where blood stained his sleeve. Riggs was nowhere to be seen. "They won't cross," the man said confidently, urging his horse up the bank and into the cover of a stand of cottonwoods. "Not with one man down and the other spooked. That river's the border of Paiute territory, they're superstitious about it." Once they were safely among the trees, he stopped and helped Eliza slide from the horse. Her legs buckled as she hit the ground, exhaustion finally claiming its due. "Easy there," the man said, catching her before she could fall. He lowered her gently to sit against a tree trunk. "You're safe now." Eliza looked up at her savior properly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with a face that spoke of hard living but retained a certain gentleness around the eyes. His clothes were practical dusty trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a well-worn leather vest. The 6-shooter at his hip looked clean and well-maintained. "Why?" she managed to croak, her voice hardly more than a whisper. He crouched beside her, offering his canteen. "Why what? Why help me?" Eliza took the canteen with trembling hands, forcing herself to sip slowly despite her desperate thirst. "Saw those men tracking something or someone yesterday. Figured it wasn't an animal when they kept checking wanted posters." He shrugged. "Never much liked bounty hunters. Vultures, the lot of them." "They'll come after you now," Eliza said, guilt washing over her. "You've made yourself a target." The man's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." He extended his hand. "Wade, Xavier. Most folks call me Wade." "Eliza Armstrong," she hesitated. "Though I suppose you already know that if you saw the posters." "Didn't get a good look at them." Wade stood, glancing back toward the river. "But I reckon we should keep moving regardless." "Can you ride?" "I'll manage," Eliza said, though her ankle throbbed painfully. Wade helped her to her feet, his touch careful but confident. "My cabin's about 4 hours' ride from here. It's not much, but it's secluded. We can get you fixed up, figure out what's next." "I can't ask you to. You didn't ask," Wade interrupted gently. "I'm offering." Something in his tone, a quiet sincerity that felt alien after months of running, made Eliza's throat tighten with emotion. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Wade lifted her onto the horse before swinging up behind her. This time, his arms came around her to hold the reins, creating a protective circle that made Eliza acutely aware of how long it had been since she'd felt safe. They rode in silence for the first hour, following a barely visible path that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. The landscape changed gradually, the open plains giving way to foothills dotted with pine and juniper. "What brought you out this way?" Wade asked eventually, his voice close to her ear. "Most folks heading west stick to the established trails." Eliza stiffened. "I had my reasons for avoiding people." "Fair enough." Wade didn't press. "We're in Nevada now, if you were wondering. Near as makes no difference to Yarrington, small town about a day's ride south of my place." "Nevada," Eliza repeated softly. She'd made it further than she'd thought. "Not much out here but mountains, dust, and the occasional silver strike," Wade said. "Town's grown some since the mines opened up, but it's still the kind of place where folks mind their business." The implication was clear, a place where a person might disappear, start fresh. Eliza let herself imagine it for a moment, a life without looking over her shoulder, without waking to every sound in the night. "These men," Wade said carefully, "the ones hunting you, they strike me as the persistent type." Eliza sighed. "They are. The man who sent them, he won't stop." "Must be quite a grudge." "His nephew is dead," Eliza said flatly. "He believes I killed him." Wade was quiet for a long moment. "Did you?" "Yes." Eliza's voice was barely audible. "He came to collect a gambling debt from the man I was to marry. When I said Thomas wasn't home, She swallowed hard. "He decided to take payment another way. I fought back. There was a letter opener on the table." Wade's arms tightened slightly around her, not in fear or judgment, but something that felt remarkably like protection. "Sounds like self-defense to me." "The courts in Missouri disagreed," Eliza said bitterly. "Especially when Thomas testified that I'd attacked his friend in a fit of jealousy. The man you were to marry turned on you." Wade's voice held a note of controlled anger. "The debts were substantial. Judge West offered to forget them if Thomas helped secure my conviction." They rode in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The air grew cooler as they gained elevation, moving deeper into the foothills. When they finally crested a rise to reveal a small cabin nestled in a grove of pines, Eliza nearly wept with relief. The cabin was indeed modest, a single-room structure built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney on one end. A small corral stood adjacent, currently empty save for a dappled mare who nickered a greeting as they approached. "Home sweet home," Wade said, dismounting before helping Eliza down. Her ankle gave way immediately, forcing Wade to catch her against his chest. Their eyes met for a moment too brief for Eliza to decipher the emotion she saw there before Wade carefully set her upright, keeping one arm around her waist for support. "Let's get you inside," he said. "That ankle needs tending." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly welcoming, clean and orderly, if spartanly furnished. A bed with a handmade quilt occupied one corner, a table and 2 chairs another. A stone hearth dominated the far wall, with cooking implements hanging nearby. Bookshelves lined the remaining space, filled with volumes that suggested a more educated man than Wade's rough exterior might indicate. Wade helped Eliza to the bed before moving to light a lantern against the gathering dusk. "Rest there. I'll see to the horses and get a fire started." Left alone, Eliza took stock of her situation. Her body ached from days of hard travel, her ankle was swollen and painful, and she was filthy beyond description. Yet for the first time in months, she felt the faintest stirring of hope. When Wade returned, he carried a basin of water and some clean rags. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her injured ankle. Eliza nodded, watching as he gently removed her worn boot and tattered stocking. His hands were calloused but gentle as he examined the swelling. "Not broken," he pronounced after careful prodding that made Eliza wince. "Bad sprain, though. Need to wrap it tight and keep weight off it for a few days." He cleaned the dirt and dried blood from her skin with methodical care, then wrapped the ankle firmly with a strip of clean cloth. His touch was clinical, respectful, the touch of a man accustomed to tending injuries but mindful of propriety. "Thank you," Eliza said when he'd finished. "For everything." Wade nodded, moving away to stoke the fire he'd built in the hearth. "You must be hungry." "I don't have much, but there's venison stew left from yesterday." The meal was simple but the most delicious thing Eliza had tasted in weeks. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching Wade from beneath lowered lashes. He moved with an easy confidence around the small space, setting water to heat for washing, laying out a clean shirt and pair of trousers that would dwarf her slight frame. "They'll be too big," he said, following her gaze to the clothes, "but clean at least. You can wash up while I tend to the horses for the night. There's soap on the shelf there." When Wade had gone, Eliza stripped off her filthy clothing with shaking hands. Using the hot water and a cloth, she washed away weeks of grime, the simple act of cleanliness bringing tears to her eyes. By the time she donned Wade's offered clothes, rolling the sleeves and pant legs multiple times, she felt almost human again. Wade's soft knock preceded his return. He entered cautiously, visibly relaxing when he saw her decent and seated by the fire. "Better?" he asked, setting his rifle by the door. "Much," Eliza answered. "I can't remember the last time I felt clean." Wade nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot hanging near the fire. "You're welcome to stay until that ankle heals," he said after a moment. "After that," he shrugged. "Well, we'll figure something out. Those men will come looking," Eliza reminded him. "I shouldn't stay more than a night." "Let them come," Wade said, a hard edge entering his voice. "This is my land, my territory. They have no jurisdiction here." "They don't care about jurisdiction," Eliza countered. "Only the bounty." Wade studied her over the rim of his cup. "How much?" $500. He whistled low. "Someone wants you badly, dead or alive," Eliza added bitterly. "Though I suspect dead would be preferred." "Well, neither is happening on my watch," Wade said with surprising vehemence. "You're safe here, Eliza. I give you my word." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten again. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Wade was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I know what it's like to be hunted for something you didn't really do," he finally said. "To have no one believe your side of the story." "What happened?" Eliza asked softly. "Army days," Wade said, his voice distant. "I was a scout, knew the territory better than most, had a way with languages. Picked up Paiute, Shoshone, even some Bannock." He sipped his coffee. Commanding officer ordered an attack on a camp I'd told him was peaceful. Women, children. He shook his head. I refused, got court-martialed for insubordination. When the attack went ahead anyway and turned into a massacre, somehow the narrative became that I'd given false information deliberately. That's terrible, Eliza whispered. Managed to escape before they could hang me, Wade continued. Been out here ever since. Built this place, make a living hunting, trapping, sometimes guiding for honest prospectors. His eyes met hers. So you see, I understand something about unjust accusations. They talked late into the night, sharing pieces of their stories, finding unexpected common ground in their experiences. Wade spoke of growing up in Pennsylvania, the son of a schoolteacher who'd given him a love of books. Eliza told him about St. Louis, her father's shop, the dreams she'd once had of designing fine gowns for ladies of quality. When exhaustion finally caught up to her, Wade insisted she take the bed while he made a pallet by the fire. Despite her protests, he was adamant. "You've been sleeping rough for weeks," he said firmly. "One night on the floor won't kill me." Eliza slept deeply for the first time in months, awakening to sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Wade was already up, cooking something that smelled wonderfully of bacon and coffee. "Morning," he greeted, setting a plate on the table. "Thought you might sleep the day away." "What time is it?" Eliza asked, embarrassed. "Nearly noon," Wade answered with a smile. "Your body needed the rest." The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Wade tended to his traps and hunting in the mornings, always returning by midday. Eliza, initially restless at being confined by her injury, soon found herself enjoying the respite. She mended Wade's clothes, organized his modest library, and even began experimenting with recipes using the stores of dried herbs hanging from the cabin's rafters. They talked more each evening, real conversations that went beyond survival and into hopes, beliefs, observations about the world. Wade was well-read despite his frontier existence, able to discuss everything from Emerson's essays to the latest scientific discoveries. Eliza found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like years, drawn to his dry wit and thoughtful perspectives. On the fourth day, Wade returned from town with supplies including fabric, needles, and thread for Eliza. "Thought you might like something to do," he said, almost shyly. "You mentioned you were a seamstress." Eliza ran her fingers over the simple calico, emotion welling in her chest at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Thank you," she managed. "This is perfect." That evening, as she worked on fashioning a new dress, Wade watched her from his chair by the fire. "You're good at that," he observed. "Your hands move like they know exactly what they're doing." Eliza smiled. "My father taught me from the time I could hold a needle, said I had a natural talent for it." "What would you do?" Wade asked suddenly. "If you could do anything, be anywhere without having to run, what would you choose?" The question caught Eliza off guard. She'd been surviving for so long she'd almost forgotten how to dream. "I'd open a dress shop," she said finally. "Somewhere small but respectable. Make practical clothes for working women, special dresses for celebrations. Nothing fancy like the shops in St. Louis, but honest work that helps people look their best on important days." Wade nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Yarrington could use a seamstress," he said casually. "Town's growing. The miners' wives complain there's nowhere to get proper clothing made." Eliza's hand stilled. "Wade, just an observation," he said, rising to add wood to the fire. "No need to decide anything tonight." But the idea had been planted, taking root in Eliza's mind as the days passed. Her ankle healed gradually, allowing her to move about the cabin more freely. Soon she was cooking alongside Wade, joining him for short walks outside, learning the rhythms of his solitary life and finding it less lonely than she'd expected. 2 weeks after her arrival, Wade returned from checking his traps with a tense expression that immediately put Eliza on alert. "What is it?" she asked, setting aside the shirt she'd been mending. "Riders," Wade said grimly. "3 of them asking questions in the hills. A hunter I know passed them yesterday, heading this way." Eliza's heart sank. "Riggs and his men," Wade nodded, moving to check his rifle. "They're persistent, I'll give them that." "I should go," Eliza said, rising quickly. "If I leave now and go where?" Wade challenged, turning to face her. "Back to running for how long, Eliza? Until they give up, or until—" "Until they catch you," Wade finished flatly. "That's no kind of life. It's the only one available to me," Eliza argued, fighting back tears of frustration. "I'm a wanted woman, Wade. That doesn't change just because I wish it would." Wade set the rifle aside, crossing the room to take her hands in his. "Stay," he said simply. "Stay and fight this properly." "What are you talking about?" "I know the territorial judge," Wade explained. "Martin Everett, good man, fair-minded. If we present your case the truth of what happened, he might be willing to hear it." "A judge in Missouri already decided my case," Eliza reminded him bitterly. "A corrupt judge with a personal vendetta," Wade countered. "This would be different. Nevada's not Missouri. The territorial courts operate independently." Hope flickered dangerously in Eliza's chest. "Even if Judge Everett believed me, it wouldn't stop Riggs. He's not working for the law, he's working for Judge West." "Then we deal with Riggs first," Wade said with quiet determination. "One problem at a time." "We," Eliza repeated softly. "You keep saying we." Wade's expression softened, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "Yes," he said simply. "We." The tension between them shifted, transformed into something electric and immediate. Eliza was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the warmth of his hands enveloping hers, of the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk everything for me?" Wade released one of her hands to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering against her cheek. "Because in 2 weeks, you've brought more life to this cabin than it's seen in 5 years, he said softly. "Because you're brave and kind and stronger than you know. Because—" He hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Eliza Armstrong, and I'm not ready to watch you run again." Eliza's heart thundered in her chest. She should protest, should remind him of all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she found herself rising onto her toes, closing the distance between them until her lips met his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened into something that felt remarkably like coming home. When they finally parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered again. "Stay, and I promise you'll never have to run again." "How can you make such a promise?" Eliza asked, even as her heart longed to believe him. "Because I'm stubborn," Wade answered with a small smile, "and because some things are worth fighting for." The plan they formulated was simple but dangerous. Rather than waiting for Riggs to find them, they would go to Yarrington and seek out Judge Everett. Wade was confident the judge would at least hear Eliza's story, particularly with corroboration from a known former Army scout. "The bounty hunters have no legal authority here," Wade explained as they prepared to leave the next morning. "If we can get the territorial judge to grant you temporary protection while reviewing your case, Riggs will have to back off or risk arrest himself." "And if he doesn't?" Eliza asked, securing the new dress she'd made into a saddlebag. Wade checked his pistol before holstering it. "Then he'll answer to me." They rode double on Wade's gelding, leaving before dawn to avoid being spotted on the trail. The journey to Yarrington took most of the day, the terrain growing less rugged as they descended from the foothills toward the small settlement nestled in a valley. Yarrington was indeed small, a single main street lined with the essential businesses of a frontier town. A general store, saloon, blacksmith, and small hotel formed the heart of the community, with scattered houses and cabins extending outward. A newly constructed church stood at one end of the street, its white steeple a stark contrast to the predominantly brown landscape. "Judge holds court in the back room of Simmons Hotel," Wade explained as they rode slowly down the dusty Main Street. Several people nodded in greeting, eyeing Eliza with curious but not unfriendly gazes. "He's usually here 3 days a week, handling everything from mining disputes to drunken brawls." "And the other days?" Eliza asked, anxiety tightening her chest as they approached the modest 2-story building marked as Simmons Hotel and Dining. "He lives on a small ranch about 5 miles south," Wade answered. "If he's not here, we'll go there." Fortune favored them. Not only was Judge Everett in town, but he had just finished hearing the day's cases when they arrived. A lean, silver-haired man with intelligent eyes, he recognized Wade immediately, greeting him with a firm handshake. "Xavier," he said warmly. "Don't often see you in town unless you're selling furs or guiding those city prospectors who can't tell north from south." "Special circumstances, Your Honor," Wade replied. "I was hoping you might hear a matter privately." The judge's gaze shifted to Eliza, taking in her simple dress and nervous demeanor with a perceptive look that missed nothing. "I see," he said thoughtfully. "My office, then." The office was little more than a small room behind the makeshift courtroom, furnished with a desk, 3 chairs, and shelves lined with law books. Once the door was closed, Wade introduced Eliza formally and began explaining her situation: the attack, the false accusations, the corrupt judge in Missouri, and the bounty hunters who'd pursued her across state lines. Judge Everett listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When Wade finished, he turned his attention fully to Eliza. "Miss Armstrong," he said evenly, "these are serious claims. Do you have anything to add to Mr. Xavier's account?" Eliza took a deep breath and told her story in full, every detail she could remember about that terrible night, the sham trial, her desperate escape. When she described Thomas's betrayal, her voice faltered briefly before steadying again. "I'm not asking for pardon for a crime I didn't commit," she concluded. "I'm asking for a fair hearing, something I never received in Missouri." The judge was silent for several long moments after she finished. Finally, he leaned forward, fingers steepled before him. "I cannot overturn a verdict from another jurisdiction," he said carefully, "not without proper legal procedure." Eliza's hope began to crumble. "However," the judge continued, "I can issue an order of protection preventing any bounty hunters or private agents from detaining you within Nevada territory until such time as a proper extradition hearing can be arranged. Given the irregularities in your case, I believe such a hearing would be warranted." "What would that mean exactly, Your Honor?" Wade asked. "It means, Mr. Xavier, that Miss Armstrong would remain free while I correspond with the Federal Circuit Court about the circumstances of her trial. If there's evidence of judicial misconduct in Missouri, and based on what you've told me, there may well be the federal court could order a review of the entire case." The judge's eyes held a glint of determination. "Justice may be slow, Miss Armstrong, but it tends to find its way eventually." Relief flooded through Eliza, so powerful she felt momentarily light-headed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Judge Everett cautioned. "This is merely the beginning of what could be a lengthy legal process, and it doesn't solve your immediate problem with these bounty hunters." "I'll handle Riggs," Wade said firmly. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Legally, I hope." "Of course," Wade answered, though something in his tone suggested contingency plans existed. Judge Everett sighed. "I'll have my clerk draw up the protection order immediately. In the meantime, I suggest you both keep a low profile." They left the judge's office with the precious document in hand, a legal shield against immediate arrest, if not a solution to all their problems. Wade led Eliza to the general store, where he purchased additional supplies while she waited anxiously by the door, her borrowed hat pulled low over her face. "We should head back to the cabin," Wade said as they exited the store. "We'll be safer there until, well," a familiar voice drawled from across the street. "Ain't this a fortunate coincidence?" Eliza froze. Riggs stood before the saloon, flanked by his two companions. All three men looked trail-worn but determined, their hands hovering near their weapons. Wade stepped slightly in front of Eliza, his posture relaxed but ready. "Gentlemen," he called evenly, "I believe you're a long way from your jurisdiction." "Ain't about jurisdiction," Riggs replied, crossing the street with measured steps. A small crowd of onlookers began to gather, sensing the tension in the air. "It's about collecting what's owed. That woman's wanted in Missouri." "That woman," Wade said firmly, "is under the protection of the territorial court." He held up the judge's order. "Any attempt to detain her will be considered kidnapping under Nevada law." Riggs squinted at the document but made no move to take it. "Paper don't mean much out here, friend. Judge West is paying good money for her return." "Judge West has no authority in Nevada territory," Wade countered. "Walk away, Riggs. Find another bounty." The hunter's face hardened. "Can't do that. Been tracking this one too long to give up now." By now, a substantial crowd had gathered, including the town marshal, a burly man with a magnificent mustache who approached with careful deliberation. "Problem here, gentlemen?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what the problem was. "No problem, Marshal," Wade answered before Riggs could speak. "These men were just leaving town, weren't you?" Riggs's hand twitched toward his gun. "Not without the woman." "The woman," Judge Everett's authoritative voice cut through the tension as he emerged from the hotel, "is currently under the court's protection." He moved to stand beside the marshal. "I've just sent a telegram to the federal marshal in Carson City regarding this matter. He'll be here by tomorrow." Riggs hesitated, clearly calculating his options. 3 against 3, but with the town's clear support behind Wade and Eliza. "This ain't over," he finally growled. "Yes," Wade said quietly, "it is. You're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Even if you somehow took her now, you'd be hunted by federal marshals before you crossed the state line." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Riggs could hear. "And I promise you, I would find you." Something in Wade's tone, or perhaps his eyes, must have convinced the bounty hunter. Riggs stepped back, spitting in the dust. "Come on, boys," he said to his companions. "Ain't worth dying over someone else's vendetta." The crowd watched silently as the 3 men mounted their horses and rode out of town, dust billowing behind them in the late afternoon light. "They might circle back," the marshal warned once they'd gone. "We'll be careful," Wade assured him. "Thank you, Marshal. Judge Everett." The judge nodded gravely. "I meant what I said about the federal marshal. He'll want statements from both of you for his report to the circuit court." After that, he shrugged. "The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn." They stayed in Yerington that night, taking a room at the hotel on the judge's insistence that it was safer than traveling after dark. The next morning, they gave their statements to the federal marshal, a no-nonsense man named Davies who listened carefully, took detailed notes, and promised to pursue the matter of judicial misconduct in Missouri. "Might take months," he warned them. "But if what you're saying is true, Judge West won't be on the bench much longer." When they finally rode out of town that afternoon, Eliza felt lighter than she had in months. The danger wasn't gone. Riggs might still be lurking, and her legal troubles weren't fully resolved, but for the first time she had hope. Real, substantial hope. "What happens now?" she asked as they followed the trail back toward Wade's cabin. Wade glanced over his shoulder at her, a smile warming his features. Now we live, Eliza. Just like that, he confirmed. "You stay with me if that's what you want until this legal business is sorted. You learn the area, meet people in town." His voice softened. "Maybe start thinking about that dress shop you mentioned." Eliza's heart swelled at the casual way he included her in his future plans. "And us?" she asked hesitantly. "What about us, Wade?" He reined the horse to a stop, turning in the saddle to face her fully. "I meant what I said," he told her, his eyes serious. "I'm falling in love with you, Eliza Armstrong. Have been since the moment you sat at my table and thanked me for a bowl of reheated stew like it was the finest meal in creation." Eliza laughed softly, tears pricking at her eyes. "I was rather grateful. And I was rather enchanted," Wade countered, reaching back to brush his knuckles against her cheek. "Still am." Eliza leaned into his touch. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "even though it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I've lost everything once before," she whispered. "I'm not sure I'd survive losing everything again." Wade's expression softened. "You won't lose me, Eliza. That's a promise I can keep." They reached the cabin as dusk was falling, the familiar silhouette a welcome sight after the tensions of the past 2 days. As Wade helped Eliza down from the horse, he didn't immediately release her waist. "Home," he said simply, the word carrying a question. Eliza looked up at the cabin, small, isolated, yet somehow filled with possibility. "Home," she agreed, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. In the months that followed, life settled into a new pattern. Eliza began accompanying Wade into Yarrington regularly, gradually becoming a familiar face to the townspeople. When the wife of the general store owner discovered Eliza's skills with a needle, she immediately commissioned a dress for her daughter's wedding. Word spread quickly, and soon Eliza found herself with a growing list of clients. Wade built her a small workroom adjacent to the cabin, with large windows to capture the natural light. By winter, they had converted one corner of the general store into a modest shop where Eliza could meet clients and display samples of her work. The legal process ground forward at its own pace. Judge West was eventually removed from the bench for multiple improprieties, though the full investigation took nearly a year. When Thomas Blackwell was arrested for fraud in Chicago, his subsequent confession, hoping for leniency, included the truth about Eliza's case. In the spring of 1874, nearly 18 months after she'd fled Missouri, Eliza received official notice that all charges against her had been dismissed. "Free," she whispered, staring at the document in her hands as she stood in the doorway of the cabin. Their cabin now expanded to include a proper bedroom and larger living space. "I'm actually free." Wade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You've been free for some time," he murmured, "but it's nice to have it in writing." Eliza leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. "I never truly believed this day would come," she admitted. "I did," Wade said simply. "I believe in justice eventually. And I believe in you." He hesitated, then added, "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you." Turning in his arms, Eliza looked up at the man who had become her protector, her partner, her love. "Yes." Wade reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small circle of polished silver. Not a traditional ring, there was no jeweler in Yarrington, but a band he'd commissioned from the blacksmith, who had worked with surprising delicacy on the special project. "Eliza Armstrong," Wade said softly, "you crossed these plains running from your past. I'm asking you to stay to build a future, our future. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Eliza's vision as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. When she found her voice again, she whispered, "Yes, yes, Wade Xavier, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Wade pressed his forehead to hers. "No more running," he promised quietly. "Not ever again." "No more running," Eliza agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss as the Nevada sun set behind them, painting the sky in hues of gold and promise. They were married that summer in Yarrington's new church, with Judge Everett attending as a guest of honor. Eliza wore a dress of her own making, simple but elegant, with tiny embroidered wildflowers along the hem, each stitch a testament to her reclaimed life and craft. By their first anniversary, Eliza's shop had become a fixture in Yarrington, drawing customers from as far away as Carson City. Wade continued his hunting and guiding, though less frequently, as they worked together to expand their home and land. When their son was born in the spring of 1876, a strong, healthy boy they named James after Eliza's father, their joy seemed complete. Watching Wade cradle their infant son by the cabin's hearth, Eliza marveled at how completely her life had transformed in 3 short years, from hunted to home. From fugitive to family, from endless running to the stillness of belonging. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, noticing her contemplative gaze. Eliza smiled, moving to sit beside him, her fingers gently brushing their son's downy hair. "I was thinking," she said softly, "that some promises are actually kept." Wade's arm came around her shoulders, drawing her close against his side. "Always," he murmured into her hair. "Always."